All right. Welcome to our webinar today, Retirement Income Intel, How Advisors Are Using Income Lab with Their Clients. We have three panelists here today that have so graciously offered their time and thoughts on this topic. And we also have Justin Fitzpatrick, who will be doing the largest majority of moderating here. Want to welcome everybody. We will give everybody just a little bit of time to get started. As a heads up, we do have another webinar coming up on December 5th with Holistiplan. So if you haven't seen that invite, please sign up for that webinar. Also, we have for our Income Lab users, Lab Talk Tuesday coming up on December 12th. So if you haven't registered for that, it is a webinar that continues to get praises because our advisors get to dive into our software with our experts and get questions answered in a deeper level. So with that, also there is a survey at the end where we really value your feedback and suggestions for ongoing webinars. So please take the time when we end this webinar, it will pop up and fill out that survey, as we do value your opinion. So with that, I will pass it over to Justin. Thank you all for joining. And Justin, there you go.
Thank you, Taylor. And thanks everybody for joining us on the panel webinar today. These are our most popular webinars by far because you get to hear how actual advisors are running their practice, how they're using Income Lab in their practice. And that's exactly the topic for today. So I want to welcome and thank our three panelists: Dylan Cobb from Simply Human Advisors, Jason Jewell from Carson Wealth, and Jimmy Miller from Boabab Wealth Management. We were just talking before we started about how great it is on these webinars, and really even just getting to know the advisors who use Income Lab, the range of practices and approaches people take. So I wanted to actually start by asking our panelists, just asking each of them, I'll call on you in turn, to just maybe talk briefly a little bit about your business, your practice, your approach, your clientele, and maybe tease a bit how Income Lab plays a part in that. So maybe Jason, you're first on my screen, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, Jason Jewell, Carson Wealth. As we think about our clientele, serve 270 families, about 500 million assets under management, clients spread throughout the country, which is what's great about technology in this day and age, is we can serve anyone and everyone without any geography and restrictions. Now, the folks we really focus on and serve best is kind of that 55 to 75-year-old client, really in the near retirement phase or in that distribution strategy, where we can really emphasize the importance of what accounts we withdraw from, in what order, and what amounts, and ultimately what's the tax consequence or benefit of those particular strategies, which really folds into much of what we're going to talk about today.
Excellent. Dylan, how about you?
Sure. Dylan Cobb, and Simply Human Advisors is my company. I'm a year and a half old in my owning my own firm. I have about 17 years of experience in this industry. I'm a CPA and certified financial planner. Despite being a CPA, I don't love diving into the weeds with clients. And I find that most of my clients don't either. And the reason for that, most of my clients are 60 to 75. Most of my clients are suddenly single, whether that's death or divorce. And what they're looking for is more simplistic visual education that they can digest easy. And you'll hear me, I try not to rail against financial planning software, but I don't like financial planning software. And there's something visually appealing and easily digestible about Income Lab, just a few of the pieces that are they're just intuitive when people see them. So we'll get into that, but that's a bit about me and my client base.
Perfect, thank you. And Jimmy, can you tell us a little bit about your practice?
Yeah, I'm an RIA, Boabab Wealth Management, been around since 2000. I'm a solo practitioner with one assistant. I serve about 100 households that I love, about 100 million under management. I keep it right about there to keep the lifestyle practice. I focus on retirement income planning mostly. I'm a goals-based, not a cash flow-based type advisor. I don't get into the weeds like Dylan with clients. And I also serve a lot of expats. I'd say about 75% of my clients are Americans that are living or want to live, retire, work, adventure overseas. I spend about half my life, a little more than half my life overseas. So it's a good niche for me to serve. There's a lot of financial planning issues when it comes to retirement income planning that Income Lab helps with, especially when working with expats overseas.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I already hear some themes coming out here about kind of being able to talk with clients at the right level, not wanting to get into the weeds if you don't have to, and so on. So maybe I'll start kind of by asking about that. So maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the ways that you use Income Lab with clients, and maybe in particular hit on both, you know, sort of the arriving at a plan analytical side, but maybe even more importantly, the communication side. Are there maybe even if you want to walk us through a real or, you know, anonymized client situation or something like that to help us understand, you know, how you use Income Lab with clients. And maybe we'll just reverse the order here and start with you, Jimmy.
Sure. So for retirement income planning, I really like to show clients, you know, two different approaches to income planning. I do use Money Guide Pro as well as Income Lab for the traditional Monte Carlo analysis. I'm big into what Michael Kitces frames a lot today, and you guys at Income Lab, it's not about success and failure with Monte Carlo. It's really, I show clients, it's, you know, an 80% chance we don't have to change anything along the way, and a 20% chance we have to change things along the way, which is really the proper way to frame Monte Carlo, I think, with clients, so they really understand. And let's be honest, most clients, they like that simplicity, like Dylan said, and they like to think about like that. I mean, what client's going to retire for 30 years and not agree that there's probably going to need to be a change somewhere along the way? Now, with Income Lab, I can really illustrate that quite easily. I love the part of Income Lab where it shows the guardrails, because I've always been a big proponent of using a 3-bucket system, putting guardrails on it. And yes, right there, you can really see, especially when you hit the view more, where they sit for income, and then what the upper and lower guardrail is. I use the terminology, they're kind of like the bumpers when you go bowling. I think a lot of advisors use that, clients love it. And it really gives them a good idea of what the rules are going to be for retirement. They like to know what's going to happen. How are we going to manage the money? What are the barriers, both top and bottom, that we're going to reach? It gives real concrete things to take action on with the clients. And in mine, there's also like a little slider on the bottom that you can change if we want to be more aggressive or with our income plan, or less aggressive, and move those barriers to kind of show them what the realistic range is. This is a super way, just like that, to show clients what retirement income can look like for them. So that's one of the key features that I use. The other real key feature that I love to share with clients is the historical analysis. The way I explain this to clients is, you know, this is the Monte Carlo looking backwards. This shows if we'd have retired you each month, looking back in history, how a 30-year retirement would have looked for you based on how we have you asset allocated. And this gives peace of mind to clients. I mean, most programs can stress test, and Income Lab can as well, really in a really great way, in showing what the income actually did through different stress tests. But this chart right here really shows clients that, hey, if you'd have stuck with your advisor, stuck with your plan, stuck with your asset allocation through thick and thin over some of the best and worst times through history, things have always worked out. I'm a Nick Murray guy. I'm an equity zealot. You know, I believe my value doesn't come in investment management. My value comes in behavioral investment counseling. and keeping clients sticking with their financial plan through thick and thin over time. And this is the best tool that I have found. I say it honestly, I'm not trying to just promote Income Lab. I say that honestly is the best tool that I found to really show clients why sticking with it over any time period that they could possibly come up with, good times or bad times, really works. And that gives them the peace of mind.
Perfect. So yeah, following on that theme of, keeping it simple and connecting with people in terms that they understand, it's the guardrails and them understanding, all right, life can change and we have a plan for change. And I'm your guide along the way. I'm going to make sure we follow this plan and talk about our options. And then the historical analysis giving comfort that, hey, future could be different from the past, but we've had some dark periods in the past, and this is how things worked in the past. Dylan, how about you? How do you use Income Lab with clients? Do you use some of the same visuals? Do you use different ones?
Yeah, one of the same. I use the guardrails. That's the first thing that I show clients when I jump into my planning software. In fact, I use Right Capital as well. I don't show anything out of Right Capital. I really only stick to these guardrails, and I also show where you have the how often will it increase and how often will it decrease out of the test plan there. I show them these two, the income adjustments, not necessarily the life experiences, but just the income adjustments. And then I also really love the cash flows, because I want to give a visual for they can see these, or they can think these things in their mind, but to have a visual of it, this is where it's coming from. And Derek Tharp did a video just last week, or posted one, where he talks about, he utilizes some of this, the guardrails and these cash flows. And this is a really good visual for when people need to, and I love the way he presented, when they need to take distributions early, and it creates a lot of hesitation or fear from people. I'm not quite Social Security age or full retirement, or maybe the age 70, but I think for you, Mr. Client, that might be the best thing to do, is delay that to age 70, because you have a lot of longevity, for whatever reason. And so here we can show that we're going to take more distributions up front, and guess what? You're going to be fine as it goes on. This visual is really powerful for clients to just see it, and that they can see that, oh, income is going to continue to go up. Inflation is something that's very hard for clients to understand. So I typically only show the nominal. I don't show it in real. And you can toggle this back and forth, inflation adjusted versus just nominal. I leave it at nominal because it's easier for people to follow. It looks, some people might want to dig into that. Well, tell me about inflation, and well, we can get into those weeds. They're all here. I love that there's this Monte Carlo. Jimmy mentioned the Monte Carlo backing all of these scenarios, but my clients don't want to get into the weeds of what Monte Carlo is, and what we don't even talk about it. But they do appreciate the fact that there's a powerful calculator back here that's following up, or at least the foundation for these scenarios that are calculated. Periodically, just like Jimmy, I will have somebody who asks about historical analysis, because they were raised by the Depression era parents. And so when you can show this, if this were the Depression and you retired now, here's what it would look like. And that's powerful. I really don't want to get into that level of depth. Usually that is a fear-based, when somebody's coming from that with questions about that. But the fact that it's there and I'm able to pull that out and show it is really powerful when I need it. So I'll stop there. We'll answer some more questions in a little bit.
Excellent. Thank you, Dylan. And Jason, last but not least, what are some of the ways that you use Income Lab with clients? And, are there parts of the app that you like to use with, every client, some clients, and so on?
Sure. So I'm going to kind of set the stage. And, we work with a lot of senior leaders, a lot of executives, a lot of multi-generational families, really those folks that have the means to meet their goals. And so as we're having conversations with newly retirees, what we found is they had developed this significant financial discipline where they made all these sacrifices during their working years. And I make this climb to the top of the mountain type movement here, because as you're climbing to the top of the mountain to reach the summit, and the summit being retirement, you do make a lot of sacrifices, whether it was for your family, whether it's for your children, and you really potentially don't live out your financial dreams in the moment because you want to live those in retirement. You want to have a bright future in retirement. The balance is in your account that can support that future. And so when those individuals do reach retirement, what we found is they tighten up their purse strings times 2, times 5, times 10. And so that psychological challenge where they truly are going from their hat facing forward to turning the hat around backwards. It's very, very different. So how do they turn their hard-earned money into income? And how do they have a plan in place that'll gives them permission to actually spend their money? And that's where we focus on spending capacity. The amount of money an individual can spend and the amount of money that is supported based on an individual's portfolio, Social Security, pension, so on and so forth. So that's really, that's where we focus our attention, is that spending capacity and helping clients understand what's possible. And through that conversation, a lot of times we'll mention something to the tune of, what if you were looking down from above and evaluating your situation, what would you have done differently? How would you have handled life differently? And that spending capacity really helps us open up that door and help them understand what is possible.
Yeah, that we've heard themes like that from some other advisors as well. This idea of giving people permission to live their life, or I don't know, giving them confidence. Because I've even been surprised to the level of which there are, of course, people in the world who are overspending their resources and so on, but it almost seems more common to find people who are, like you said, really tightening up, being even more conservative in their spending when they hit retirement. And that, this framing it as spending capacity, like this is what you could spend. If you're spending within this, you're fine. That really seems to make a difference. I know, Jason, you also mentioned on the tax side that you do some work there as well. Wonder if you could share with us sort of ways that you use the app, turns of a phrase that you might use to start that conversation that we could share.
Yeah, well, there's two guarantees in life, and we can't use the G word in our industry, but there are 2 guarantees in life, and that is, unfortunately, death and taxes. And I heard a phrase recently from a client, and you all should continue to use this phrase, and that was, I'm willing to pay my fair share of taxes, but I don't want a tip. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is through decumulation and withdrawal strategies, where there are appropriate accounts to take distributions from in order to create tax efficiencies. And there's a lot of strategies out there, right? And Income Lab does a great job kind of outlining those in the tax center. And so, we've got the ability to quantify different strategies and approaches, whether that's your conventional approach, right? Which would be your taxable distributions first, which you erode, moving on to the pre-tax, and last but not least, the tax-free, or whether it's the pro rata, or whether it's evaluating the advantages of Roth conversions and looking at dynamic distribution strategies, or maybe more importantly, dynamic time sensitive. And the thing about retirement is it's an evolution. It is very unique. And not only are we putting our hat around and turning our hat around backwards, but the life that I'm living today and the life that our clients live today is very different than the life that they're going to lead in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. And so we need to be able to adjust, whether that's adjusting to their lifestyle and the desires they want to lead, whether it's adjusting to markets and the changes within markets with fluctuations and volatility, or whether it's changes within tax code. And that's where being able to quantify these distribution strategies is incredibly helpful. And what I'd want to note is there is a textbook answer and there is a psychological answer. What do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So here we're underneath Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back since 2017, and we've got the ability to leverage this tax code to our advantage, and potentially through Roth conversions, tax bracket management, and being able to demonstrate and quantify if we executed a Roth conversion of X amount, targeting the 24% tax bracket, what's going to be the advantage? How much in tax savings results? What's the total net income as a result? What's the net legacy impact, right? With the changes to the Secure Act and changes to that 10-year period with a beneficiary and a beneficiary IRA. And so truly helping clients understand, okay, if we target the 24% tax bracket over the next 3 years via Roth conversions, here's the impact. Well, what if we target 32? That might feel uncomfortable, right? But how do we quantify what the true savings would be? And then let's take it a step further though. What would you do with that money? Because that's where rubber meets the road. I think as advisors, we get caught up in solution. But our real job, my real job, is to help clients identify a problem. And then through the solution, how do they benefit? And not focusing as much on the solution, but focusing more on the benefit. And how would that benefit shift their life? How would that benefit change the trajectory of what they want to do in retirement? How that's going to impact them directly from a financial perspective, but also their family.
I think that last point is a really good one. Definitely a good one for me to remember, because I am, analytical by nature. So I might be tempted to sort of say, well, this is the end of the story right here. Well, look, $600,000 more. That's it, right? But taking that next step of, okay, but how does this affect you? What does your life look like? It actually connects back to this, I forget who was saying it, the focus on spending capacity. It's just think about, what does your life look like in that situation? Dylan, I know you came off mute there. Do you have something you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on that tax center for just a second. Again, I'm a CPA, and I've prepared thousands of tax returns, and at the end of the day, there are so many variables to this that it's really hard to pinpoint what is going to impact it and how it's going to impact it. Most of us, if we've been doing this long enough, you can get a gauge for what you're looking for, and these variables that are in a client's life, what it's going to look like. And Justin, if you don't mind, just click on that edit button right there. And you can see, I love looking at this real quick before I even pick a strategy that I know what I'm using. I know what I want to compare it to, but you can scroll down and you can see, how is this going to impact a client if I convert through a certain bracket, what Jason was just describing, and how that's going to impact your average tax over a lifetime. I love to be able to just scroll down, and in most cases, I already know roughly where I want to go, and there are some breakpoints that you can just kind of look at it. And this is really valuable for me to just run down this list and just kind of look at it and validate some of what I'm already thinking. And sometimes it even challenges me to go back and rethink. And I use Holistiplan. So then I'll take some of that and then go really mock out some of these scenarios in very fine detail. But this is one of the few places where I can look Income Lab in all of these tax center pieces. It's one of the few places where I can just I can take a step back and take a big picture look and then just kind of think through and invalidate some of what I'm thinking and planning for a client, and then realize I want to go up to this point, but I don't want to go further. And even though maybe, like what Jason said, maybe there's some longer term benefits to Roth conversion doing it at a higher bracket now, but maybe there's contributions, charitable or some other piece, or maybe I just know the client and they're just not willing to go this far for one reason or another. So again, it's just a 30,000-foot overview that you can't get anywhere else. That's one of the things that I love about your tax center tax strategies here.
Yeah, and I think you hit on, I think Jason, you called it, there's sort of a mathematical answer and a practical answer or something like that. I like how you said there are kind of these breakpoints still in, like in this plan with, it has particular things to it. A different plan could be different, but okay, wow, when I go from 12 to 22, that's when I start to see some real benefit. I see smaller benefits here. And then after that, like you said, I mean, I've seen, a 5 basis point difference over however long this plan is nothing to write home about. That's, that's a rounding error, right? So I like how both of you hit on that there's some art to this. It's not pure science. I like that a lot. I wanted to, since all of you have been, using Income Lab for, a while now, I wanted to ask a bit about what beginning to use Income Lab was like for you, how it changed anything in your practice, and then also how your clients reacted to it, especially ones maybe that you already had, and then you introduced this tool to them. I know that's a question we get a lot from new users is, well, what's the transition like? Is it disruptive or is it smooth? Jimmy, I know when we actually met in Miami not too long ago, and I know you were saying you'd had a lot of good experiences with that. So I'd love to hear about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like to just say I also use the tax center quite a bit with clients. The whole art and science, the way I frame it is I use the Goldilocks and the 3 bears. I just wanted to add that in there. All right, I can mathematically show somebody why doing a major Roth conversion mathematically makes the most sense to them. But right, maybe that porridge is just a little too hot. But they understand the purpose for Roth conversion, that they don't want to not do any Roth conversion, and maybe that porridge is just a little too cold, right? And I help them find that porridge is just right. So that's the analogy I use there with the tax center when I show them that stuff. I'm a big Roth conversion guy as well. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Divorce the IRS. I haven't been audited by the IRS since I wrote that book. And it's really changed my practice and writing the book. And it's really a book about Roth conversions and all the tax time bombs that can come from having pre-tax money. So your question about using Income Lab out of the gate, I'll be honest, any software, especially a complex financial planning software, is always going to have a steep learning curve. It takes time. You have to dedicate time to learn a new software, whether it's Income Lab or Holistiplan or any other software. So there is some learning stuff. Now, if you're coming from another financial planning software, I mean, you could use Income Lab as a standalone. I think a lot of people use it on top of a Right Capital or Money Guide Pro or something like that. A lot of it's going to be familiar. You learn where things are, where to put them in, and you just can't be afraid when you're sitting with a client for the first few times to let them know, hey, this is a new software to me, or things are always evolving in our industry. And if there's something on there that you just I don't know how they're coming up with that number. I don't know why there's a dip in the graph right there. I just share that with a client. I say, you know what? I'm not really sure off the top of my head why that is, but I can assure you that I can find out for you, right? I got a whole team at Income Lab that can help me dissect that, figure it out. I don't want to give you a wrong answer, but I'll get the right answer for you on that. And you'll be surprised most of the time you probably won't run into that. And of course, many advisors have had that experience and clients love it. Honestly, when you just are honest with them and tell them, I don't know the answer to that, or I don't know why it's saying that. Let me figure that out and get back to you. Income Lab, I think most advisors, like we're hearing on the panel from the panelists today, are using it at a very high educational type level and not getting so deep into the weeds. If you have clients that want to get deep into the weeds, you're probably preparing for it, or you're also maybe an engineering type financial advisor, cash flow advisor, and you're going to dissect Income Lab to that level before you start presenting it to your clients. So whatever kind of advisor you are, I would say don't be afraid to jump in and use Income Lab with clients. That's how you get that experience and learn the client reactions, what they like, what they don't like. It takes some time to learn.
Like that comment also about things are always changing in our industry. There's new tools that come along. Certainly your clients would expect you to be keeping abreast of those, right? So introducing new things is kind of par for the course, I guess. Dylan and Jason, either one of you have heard feedback from clients when they first saw this, or have stories about the transition?
Yeah,
Dylan?
I'll give just a quick summary. So I'm a Carl Richards draw on the back of the napkin type of an advisor. That's the way I present to people. So, and the reason why I've never liked financial planning software is because they're so overwhelming. I mean, how many of us look over the shoulder at one of our contemporaries' custom-built Excel spreadsheets, and we're all Excel people, and it takes us a minute to orient ourselves, and our contemporary has to explain what we're looking at. So that is true in any presentation in any software. And yet, I think you guys have done just the right, like you say, the porridge analogy, the three bears. This is just right, where I can take visually some of the things and explain in-depth concepts with clients visually that my clients who, again, if I'm talking to somebody who's recently widowed, recently divorced, even a couple of years out, sometimes it's very hard to process all of what we do. But visuals help. And this is so visually appealing, and it explains what I'm looking to explain. And I find that most of my clients are simply trying to answer the question, how much can I spend? And I've always used that question. And then when I saw that you guys built the software that has in the system that basically answers the question, how much can I spend? I said, I've got to learn more about you guys. You've answered the question that I've tried to answer on the back of a napkin for almost 2 decades now of planning. And so that's the short summary. So specific to how it's received from clients, my clients continue to give me feedback. I'm a visual person. These visuals help.
That comment, sorry, go ahead, Jason. If you want to answer that question too.
Oh no, you're doing great. I'm just thinking there's so many sound bites. Jimmy's sound bites, Dylan's sound bites that are coming out of this session. As we think about the dynamic nature of retirement, the dynamic nature of the markets, and how do you marry those two together? That's where I think the history that Jimmy or Dylan had pointed out earlier comes back into play. If you're able to look back over the last 30 years, how an individual's income would have had to adjust based on the nature of the markets. But then, as we think about, that kind of quote unquote spending capacity, and we think about those guardrails, I've found that clients really like the idea of having a target. And we've got a really clear-cut expectation of the upper guardrail and the lower guardrail. Upper guardrail being a portfolio value and how that portfolio value would grow to become, and at that point, what the client would be eligible for a pay increase, versus the opposite, which they're more concerned about or interested in, and that's the lower guardrail. In the lower guardrail, how far would their portfolio need to fall based on their current allocation in the markets for them to have to take a pay cut? And then realizing that, oh my gosh, the pay cut actually isn't nearly as substantial as I would have thought. Or furthermore, the lower guardrail is much lower than they expected. The portfolio would need to fall substantially further than they ever would have imagined before they would even need to adjust their income, potentially reducing their income. So that's a big eye.
So do you use this the retirement stress test to show that, to tell that story, Jason?
Well, we all have these clients that have deep-rooted financial just understanding. And maybe they went through the Great Depression, their parents went through the Great Depression, so they've got this influence from their parents. And so when you can overlay the Great Depression, as drastic as that was, and to show them, okay, during the Great Depression, here would have been the impact to your retirement plan. Or 2008, that's much more front and center for people's minds. To throw out the global financial crisis as an example, here would have been that influence. So being able to run the gamut historically back to the Depression to current is quite eye-opening.
Yeah. I wonder if we could maybe we'll sort of wrap up our panel discussion and eventually get some questions here. I know there's quite a few, but wrapping it up, I guess, are there ways that any other ways that you communicate this to clients? I think that's been one of the biggest pieces, like you said, Jason, is getting some of these sound bites that people can take back to their practice, things that resonate really well with clients. The Goldilocks metaphor, I think, is a great one for Roth conversions. Maybe it can also be used for guardrails as well. Are there other things that you say to clients when you're presenting, for example, adjustment-based planning, guardrails, and so on? I think we heard the bumper bowling. That was also from you, Jimmy. That's a great one. Any other things that you found resonate really well with clients?
Yeah, the other thing, I'm big about sequence of returns risk, and I love to use that historical chart to really demonstrate sequence of returns risk. Of course, when the market runs up and clients, their portfolios run up and they hit that $1 million mark or whatever it is, I can retire now. And most people don't realize that when the markets have run up and you're at the very top of the market, your portfolio is the biggest it's ever been, but it's maybe actually not the best time to retire because you have a more likely negative sequence of returns in front of you and higher chance for those adjustments and things like that. Clients don't intuitively know that, and I like to use Income Lab to share that, why oftentimes retiring when the market's down is a much more secure way to retire. And this makes people who want to retire when the markets maybe aren't doing so well like now feel much better that, oh, I didn't even think about sequence of returns risk. And going forward, I'll probably likely have a positive sequence of returns risk. And you can use Income Lab to really demonstrate how having a positive sequence of returns in the first 5 or 10 years of retirement makes a whopping difference in the overall plan, how much the Monte Carlo adjusts, how much you might have to make adjustments and things like that. So I love using Income Lab for sequence of returns risk to demonstrate that to clients for sure. The other thing I like about Income Lab is that I use I like to use guardrails, and my clients like it that I speak to them in that kind of language. I'm a big proponent of Riskalyze, also nitrogen. We always talk about investments, not as risk, as the speed we're driving our investments. It looks like the speed limit sign, right? And through Income Lab, I can really marry it with nitrogen and figure out with each client, hey, we're going to sit down today and we're going to figure out, what speed you like to drive, but what speed do you need to drive to get to that destination? If you're driving across the country to a wedding in the other side of the country, you got to figure out what speed you need to drive or when you need to leave, right? And that's marrying nitrogen with Income Lab can really show that. And if you need to drive a little bit faster, Income Lab is a great tool to show them how, if we increase the speed a little bit, how that's going to impact the amount of income that they can have and those guardrails, and how it all starts to come together. So clients know that you got the total picture of what the client's trying to do, how different things interact with each other. And it just gives them that peace of mind to trust you as that advisor, so you can keep it at that high level and give them that peace of mind.
Can we click on the Life Hub? We've gone 40 minutes. We haven't even looked at the Life Hub yet. I have a client who I did show just I clipped this and showed a picture. She's a widow, and she said, "Oh, look, there's me right there in the middle." And I didn't have it all expanded. I think I had the second one, the middle one, where it was just that summary right there, just because I wanted her to visually see this is everything you've got, and it's all in one neat little picture for her. And I didn't have to recreate this wheel. And I love that she said, "Oh, there's me right there," and the little person right there. So
Yeah, it's I've heard that from a lot of advisors, like the power of seeing your whole financial life in one place. I don't think I understood ahead of time how great that was for people, like how much confidence that actually gives them. It seems so simple because, you know, like I said, it's easy to get into the wanting to do a lot of analysis and things, but yeah, definitely heard similar feedback.
now you'd really take this up a notch if I could add their picture to the center of that.
That's definitely been discussed around here for sure. Yeah, not a lot of people have blue and green clients, hopefully. So, okay.
Justin, there is a question since we are talking about Life Hub. How often do you all show Life Hub and how much time do you spend with it? Do you show it more frequently or earlier for newer clients, or have a process to always review it with all clients?
I am going to admit I don't use this much. I only use it as essentially a replacement for a net worth statement. It's just a visual replacement for that. I'm really not digging into it. I have shown it with one client recently where I kind of fast forwarded through a few things just to demonstrate that I'm looking at future pieces. And you can see on the timeline there of milestones. This is where I hesitate to really go through a lot of this because I don't want the client to get lost. I just want a big picture visual, but this does help me demonstrate that I'm looking at lots of variables over a long period of time, and there are milestones. And I really don't want to do much more than that, if that helps.
Yeah, that does make sense. If you know, this can be a way we've heard for people to, well, in kind of discovery and so on, it can be a real incentive for certain people to make sure that, you know, their picture is full. But I can certainly imagine there's a lot of pieces here, so it can be a little confusing for some people. Jason?
What I would say, Justin, you know, from a prospecting standpoint, and you all jump in if this has not been the case for you, but a lot of times maybe you meet a prospect, you've had a meeting or two, you've gone through some discovery, and maybe you're jumping into financial planning. And for whatever reason, maybe they omitted an account that they kept at another institution with another custodian. So when you pull up Life Hub, it brings their full financial picture. To your point, Dylan, it's kind of a net worth statement. And you'll start to discover more assets because they want to see that the accuracy of all their accounts, the accuracy of their balances, and there's almost a competitive nature that comes out of them. So finding new assets is a really helpful way to do that. But what I would also mention is, you know, we oftentimes use the metaphor or analogy of a Rubik's Cube. And as you think about cash flow, as you think about your assets, we really need to have a coordinated effort. And we need to understand when Social Security is starting, the amount of Social Security. You know, is there you know, is it a married couple? How does distribution strategies and investments blend in together? We've got IRMA brackets. You know, the list goes on. But for a Rubik's Cube to be complete, which I can't complete, by the way, my nephew can do it in 17 seconds. It's phenomenal. He's 10, 17 seconds. And so a Rubik's Cube, you need to have all 6 sides completed perfectly. And that's very much our financial situation. If we're truly looking to optimize. So how do you optimize Social Security? How do you optimize, your traditional Roth distribution strategies? How does a pension come into play? And Dylan, you made a really important point earlier. When you think about income, we might have a client who retires. They retire at 62. And maybe we're going to wait on Social Security until full retirement age, possibly even 70. Here we're taking a larger distribution up front from their investments to supplement their lifestyle. Then Social Security kicks in, we reduce that distribution rate. And so just to be able to demonstrate all these different cash flows, all these different timestamps and mile markers, like we see up here with the RMD, right? How does a required minimum distribution, how does that impact an individual's tax situation? How does that impact their Medicare premiums? So the list really goes on.
Taylor, maybe we'll just we'll get through. I know we've got even more questions now than when I last looked. So
Yeah, we do have quite a few. And just a reminder, if you'd like to hear them answered, since we have so many, please like them. And so we can hit the most liked ones. So we do have some that are pertaining to investment allocations and stuff like that, investment management. And this one kind of goes back to Jimmy. How do they integrate investment management with Income Lab? Jimmy, you mentioned using the bucket strategy.
Yeah, so in Income Lab, you can set you can use the default type allocations, or you can customize it yourself for what you want to put in there. I'm an equity zealot, being a Nick Murray guy, being the least risky over long periods of time. So I generally use Nitrogen or Riskalyze much more to show and demonstrate the asset management side of it, apart from Income Lab to show the income side of it. So I really use those two softwares for what they're best at and separate that out. But you can adjust if they want to make an adjustment in their Nitrogen portfolio to drive faster, as I would say, their investments. Then I come over and I do that behind the scenes in Income Lab.
I liked the driving metaphor. Obviously, that works really well for Nitrogen, given their, the speed limit visuals. But yeah, I had not heard that before about, like, in a way, it's absolutely applicable in a slightly different way to Income Lab, because you're saying, well, both how fast are you driving, but how fast do you need to drive, right? So you might have somebody they're going to struggle to find a way to spend $17,000 a month. And so they don't actually need to drive that fast. Whereas somebody else might say, well, it's not crazy to, drive a little faster, drive the speed limit, if you need to, and so on. I think that's one I'm going to take away for sure. And it is different. We're talking about risk to your income, to your level of spending. Nitrogen is looking at other equally important risks surrounding portfolio levels, but you can kind of meld the language together there.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to tell people, you can be too risky. You can drive too fast. If you go driving 100 miles an hour towards that wedding across the country, you're probably not going to make it there as fast as the person who's only driving 70, because you'll be probably spending a few nights in jail for reckless driving somewhere as you get across the country. So too much speed can also hinder you, and you can demonstrate that in Income Lab as well with the income, for sure.
Right.
The next question, anybody else want to touch on that before we move on to the next question? Okay. Which reports are these advisors using, or are they simply presenting on a screen?
Great question.
I am not using reports, and I'm not presenting I'm not showing this. I'm not logged in with a client. I actually screenshot everything and put it into a presentation that I built. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Even as visually appealing as this is, I don't want to get lost in all the other things around it. I want to focus on only the things that I want to focus on. So in the guardrails, when you click on the view more there, I'm just screenshotting the center of this from if balance. I don't even have that line down at the bottom, because I just want them to focus on the visual. And so I could print that and I could use it, but it still has a few things around the edge. And again, I'm trying to extreme focus on a few things. and I don't want to get distracted by too many other things. I kind of want to control the conversation. So I'm not logged in with clients often. Occasionally I do. But I'm not using the reports either. I'll just screenshot it. So if that helped.
Yeah, that's great. I do the same thing. I do interactively use the software with clients. I don't give them reports. I stopped giving that a long time ago. I will screenshot some stuff and put it into like a 1 or 2 page summary email or that I give to the clients. I'll often print a report or save a report as a PDF and put it in their client file for my own compliance reasons. And so I can go back a year later and see what were all the numbers that we were looking at last year and how things have changed. So for my own history. But yeah, I do it interactive. The other tool that I really like to use with Income Lab is Loom. Being my clients are all over the world and in crazy places in different time zones. I love to pull Income Lab up and then just hit a Loom recording and kind of walk through. Here's the guardrails, here's our spending, here's the update, whatever your style is for a quick review. And then shoot off that Loom to clients. It's so proactive, and clients absolutely love it. They can respond right in the Loom. It's so great.
I second that. And actually, we often have advisors who will ask our customer service team questions with Loom as well. They'll say, "Oh, let me just show you what's going on here. What, can you help us out?" We'll even respond with a Loom. So yeah, if anybody wants to check that out, I'd encourage you as well.
Loom's amazing. I mean, that's a big thing in our industry about doing surge meetings. Man, you want to take surge meetings to the next level, just do surge Loom meetings, right? I mean, then you can have your own schedule. You can record all their reviews. You can even throw in others, how your family's doing. I mean, you can make it as personal as you want and send it out to clients. And that proactivity really makes the clients feel like you're interested in them. You're talking to them all the time. And it really cuts down tremendously how often clients are contacting you with this question or that question or how they're doing, which really frees up your time, which is the point of surge meetings. So surge meetings with Loom.
Jason, do you want to touch on what you're using? And maybe Dylan, you mentioned the guardrails of that screenshot that you grab. Are there any other few that you grab as well, just so they know?
Well, I've already mentioned the cash flows. I love the cash flows piece, and then I screenshot the how often might this change. So if I'm going to show somebody the guardrails, and yes, this cash flow, because I want them to visualize where it's going to come from throughout their life. But if I'm going to show them the guardrails, one question that pops up frequently is, okay, well, if it hits this upper or lower guardrail, well, how often does that happen? Well, this answers that question. And in my presentation, just beneath these, you couldn't do this, but I put in there some words. Look, it's increasing often, it's decreasing rarely. And so these are, I know people are going to ask that question. Well, once you see the guardrails, well, that does happen. And I'm curious, well, how often does this happen? So this answers that.
Yeah. And for those who like to use reports, and Jason, I'm curious if you do, but there are some report modules that encompass we think of this as the near term income plan. And then, this is more of the long term, okay, over a long period of time, what might we expect in terms of, should we expect more upside, more downside, and so on. So there are some report modules, in particular, if you're, governed by FINRA at all, you might have different ways that you have to do reports. So, Jason, how about you? Do you do live use of the app? Do you use reports?
No reports. We made a concerted effort to work with financial delegators. And so they really don't look to get into the weeds. I think maybe as advisors, me in particular, I maybe go into the weeds and it's unnecessary. And so I've just kind of started asking that question, how deep do you want to go? And more times than not, 9 out of 10, it's, yeah, no, this is appropriate. And they just want to know that their money's going to last a lifetime, or have confidence that the money's going to last a lifetime, that they can live the life that they've dreamt, and maybe even dream a little bigger than what they thought was possible. And that's where I think, Income Lab serves a great purpose. And then, of course, from a distribution perspective, the tax planning component, really incredible. And I didn't finish my thought. And I mentioned earlier, there's a textbook answer and there's a psychological answer. Our job is very much that Goldilocks, like Jimmy said. It's finding that happy medium, it's finding that right temperature. But if a client understands how to quantify the benefits of a Roth conversion or tax bracket management, they can start to get more comfortable with pushing the envelope closer to that 24 or 32% bracket.
We have just a few minutes left. Looking at the questions, there are some more intricate ones that we can answer one-on-one outside of this, but we have 2 questions that have a lot of votes asking where in the world is Jimmy, and is that his real office? So I thought it would be quite funny to just have you address that, Jimmy, because we have people, 10 people asking that, so might as well just have a little humor to wrap this up. Jimmy?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm on my sailing catamaran. It's a 41-foot Fountaine Pajot Lipari. I travel around. I have an office in Anchorage, Alaska, which I try to spend time in the summer, and one in Florida, which I spend time in the winter. And so I sail around Florida and the Keys and over to the Bahamas. I'm a total digital practice. I use Loom, like I've said, and Zoom and all that kind of stuff. So I'm totally location independent. And I find working from the sailboat with Starlink the most appealing thing for my lifestyle practice. So that's where I'm at. I'm on the sailboat today.
All right. So I know that some people have dropped off, but we do have one more question that has a lot of votes. I figured we could maybe pop that on. Justin, what do you think? Your call?
Sure, we might, if it's a quick one.
It's about Roth conversions. So when looking at breakpoints for Roth conversions, how do you all integrate the Medicare increase in cost, and how would that impact your decision? So it's kind of a heavy conversation, but figured maybe we can knock that out.
Yeah, I mean, we do include that. So we treat Medicare IRMA, just the extra amount, as a tax. So that can be confusing to people. I've actually had a few people, look at this and say, hey, Medicare IRMA is easy. I've looked at the amounts you have for Medicare IRMA here, and they're not correct. Well, we're not including the base Medicare premium. Everybody's got to pay that, so that's not a tax. So it's only the amount that's over it that's here. I mean, maybe we should treat it differently, but that's how we do it. So that's included here. And I forget who it was. I think it may have been you, Dylan. There are just so many moving pieces with our tax system. Medicare IRMA is one of them. Taxability of Social Security is another. Some things are adjusted for inflation, some are not. I mean, it is crazy how complex the system is. And so as much as possible, we're trying to include every piece of that in the calculations here, and then roll it up to a level that you could actually talk with a client about, which is, hey, given all of that, here's how it looks like these things stack up. Yeah, Jimmy.
And I know next week, I think you guys have a thing with Holistiplan. If you're using Income Lab, Holistiplan is an easy add-on. Their Roth explainer, when you upload somebody's tax return, and then you use the Roth explainer in their chart, along with the Income Lab chart, and showing the Income Lab really shows the overview of how much you can save in a lifetime tax plan, not just in your taxes this year. But then the Holistiplan really shows why you're making a good decision at going to the top of the 24% tax bracket, or oftentimes they're 32, or oftentimes just stopping a little bit short of the top of a bracket because you're triggering an AMT or an investment tax, or too much Social Security is getting to. I mean, there's a lot of things, but their chart really marries in with the high level view from Income Lab to what are we doing this year for that Roth conversion with Holistiplan. So if you think about Income Lab, you should also, I believe, think about Holistiplan as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Justin.
I've heard a lot of people talk about it as Income Lab is about long-term strategic decision-making, And Holistiplan is kind of that, the last mile or 5 miles or whatever it is to actually tactically implementing something. Because like you said, there are complexities in your situation. Could be AMT, could be something else that could make the implementation slightly different than what you'll see here.
And with that, we do have a Holistiplan and Income Lab webinar coming up on December 5th. So please make sure you register for that. I popped the link in the questions, but we also have it in email and on our social media sites. So we are at the top of the hour. Thank you, Jason, Dylan, and Jimmy for joining us. Thank you for all of those that attended. And please remember the survey at the end. Your feedback is always valuable. But Jimmy, some people say, do you need an assistant? And so there are some funny people today on our webinar, so I appreciate the humor.
All right.
But
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.